morning, everyone, or afternoon, whatever time it is that you may be watching. My name is Robin, and this is Knotting Hook Crochet, and welcome to the channel. So, today we're going to do a basic stitch for Mosaic Overlay Crochet. And if you've never done it before, this is a very good place to start. And I believe some people call this stitch Apache Tears. But so to get started, what I did is I decided I'm going to make my sample here in multiples of 6. So meaning every 6th stitch, I will do the drop down mosaic. Every row is done with a different color, or you can use 2 colors, 3 colors. You can use whatever color pattern you would like. So what I did is I took one of these cakes and I broke it apart. I just pulled from the center and chunked it out by colors and came up with all of these little yarn balls and made this sample. So you only work from one side, you never turn your work, so you do end up with the little ends on both sides. You can turn it into a fringe, or you can work them in as you go. Or there's some tutorials, a couple of them out there that show how to do a double border where you work a border around the edges and close them in where they can't be seen. So I think what we're going to do is, instead of multiples of 6, I want my little diagonal stripes there to be a little closer together. Let's try doing it in 4s and see how that goes. So this particular yarn calls for a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. So that is what I'm going to use. And I'm just going to lay out my colors here in the order that I want to use them. I think I'm going to leave these 2 colors out this time. Okay, so you will need some scissors. Because you have to cut your yarn at the end of every row. So to get started, we're going to do multiples of 4 plus 3. So we're going to make a slip knot. And form a chain in multiples of 4. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have 20, and then plus 3. So the plus 3 is 1 is your turning chain, and at the end of each row you have what is called a border stitch, and that's where you're going to work a regular double crochet. A regular single crochet. The rest of the single crochets will be back loop only once you get past the first row. So, or the second row actually. So what you're going to do is single crochet, skipping the first chain from the hook. Of course, the loop on the hook does not count. And you're going to go into each stitch and do a single crochet all the way to the end of your row. And you should end up with 22 stitches. So let's do that and see how it works out for us. Okay, so I reached the end of my row and I do have my 22 stitches. So I'm going to cut my yarn and fasten off, and that is row 1. Now we're going to move on to our next color. You can fasten on however you are comfortable fastening on. I'm going to do mine like a standing single crochet. So in the very first stitch, not our turning chain, we're going to do a regular single crochet. And then no fancy work on this row, with the exception of all your single crochets all the way to the very last stitch will be back loop only. So the back loop is the furthest away from you, like here's the V. So you only want to pick up that loop there. But this one is it's a great pattern for getting your feet wet in Overlay Mosaic Crochet. Okay, so I'm to my last stitch, and this one is our border stitch. So we go through both loops, go under both loops, and fasten off and cut our yarn. Okay, so that's where we're at now. Now the third row is where we need to really start to pay attention to what we're doing. So we're gonna, again, attach our next color. Very first stitch. Okay, the way I did that is called a standing double crochet. You can also do it by, chaining and then going back into the same space and doing a double crochet. So now, since we decided on multiples of 4, our very first stitch is going to be what is called a drop down double crochet, meaning you would yarn over and come down and pick up that front loop that we didn't use from before to create the stitch. So then you would yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through the last 2. And that leaves the stitch behind there is empty. So you need to move over to the next stitch into the back loop and do a single crochet. So that's 1, 2, 3, and then our fourth stitch, we want to do the drop down. Now I like to do mine different from the traditional way of doing it. I like to anchor my stitch because it gives you a beautiful back. You don't have these big pockets forming on it. And actually, I like the back of this one better than I like the front of it. So our fourth stitch, I'm going to work into my back loop, pull my yarn through. Then I'm going to yarn over and come down and pick up the front loop and pull through 2. Then I have 3 on my hook, and then I'll pull through all 3 of those. And then I'm going to do 3 of the back loop only single crochet. And on the fourth one, the drop down, and that's called an anchored, the way I do it, an anchored drop down double crochet, so that I don't get the little pucker pockets on the back. Some people like those. I just prefer not to have them. So that's 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to do our drop down. And when you go down, you go underneath. Don't go in from the top, go in from underneath. Okay, so now we want 3 back loop only single crochets. And we're ready for another drop down because we decided on multiples of 4. And then 3. And that brings us to our border stitch where we're going to work through or work under both of the loops and make a regular, ordinary, old-fashioned single crochet and then fasten off and cut our yarn. Okay, so then we're ready for our next color. And as of right now, they're pretty subtle changes in the color, but it starts to blend together really well. Okay, so slip knot. Attach to our first stitch. Now we're still working on the same side. We are not turning our work. Have my standing double. I have a back loop only single. And now because down here was our first overlay, our next stitch is going to be the overlay. So it's always, almost always, the very next stitch will be your overlay double. So then if you count 3 back loops, 1, 2, 3, and then it should be a drop down. And then 3, and a drop down. And it's easy to find your stitch you're attaching to because it's right next to the previous row's drop down. And then 3. Oops, look at me. Okay. And 3. And a drop down. And now we have 2 because that's creating a diagonal line. And our last stitch of a regular, ordinary, everyday single crochet. Fasten off. And time for the next color. Let me tell you, yesterday I was working on a different mosaic video and I spent hours. I created my own chart, my own pattern, marked the whole chart off with the X's to know where the double crochets are supposed to go to create the pattern. Spent hours crocheting it, and I pre-did a sample to make sure that my pattern was going to work, and I did great with that. So I get it to where I'm trying to record it, and I get to get finished and realize, oh no, I messed up. So I had to take out 3.5 rows. And I redo those 3.5 rows, get it all finished, and I'm like making my closing statement. And I noticed, oh no, way back down, like in the middle of the work, I made a mistake. And I trashed the whole video. I said, I can't do this. You can't do a tutorial with a big old mistake in it like that. Anyhow, so now we're going on to our 5th color. And we're going to attach. Okay, so we have 1, 2. Our 3rd stitch will be a drop down. And then 1, 2, and 3. And our 4th stitch is a drop down. And of course it's right next to the one from the previous row. And then 3 back loop only single crochets. And the 4th becomes the drop down. One, 2, 3, and our 4th one is the drop down. So that's 1, 2, 3, and a drop down. And then we have 1 back loop, and we're at the end where we go under both our regular old ordinary single crochet and fasten off, cut our yarn, and then we move on to the next color. Okay, see how we're, hopefully the camera's picking up this ridge texture that it's making. Look how nice the back looks by not having those pockets on there. Okay, so we just did that one. Now we're on this color. Going to fasten on. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So the next row after this one, we need to create another first stitch being a drop down so that it creates another diagonal pattern. So we had 3, and then our drop down, and then 1, 2, 3, and a drop down. and 1, 2, 3, and a drop down, and then 3, and a drop down, and then 3, and a drop down, and our very last stitch is our border stitch of a regular old ordinary single crochet and fasten off. Okay, so now if you notice over here we ended on this side, so that means when we start our next row, our first stitch is going to be a drop down so that we can create another diagonal line. We're going to fasten on. Our very first stitch, back loop, and drop down, okay, and then we should have 3 back loop only singles, and drop down, and then 3, and drop down. Now the reason I picked a cake is they choose the colors for me. I just look at it and see all the pretty colors. I like the combination and say, okay, I'll try this one. So I took it apart because the colors changing stripes wouldn't happen fast enough for me. Like for doing this sample or for something that's small. So I took it apart so I could control where my colors fell. Like if I wanted to, or if you wanted to, since it would be your project, you could do 2 rows of each of your colors so that it is more of a chunk, especially since you're working with, you know, single crochet. Or you could do 3 rows and then move on to the next color. Okay. So we have one more color left in my set of colors here because I took the 2 out. I mean, I don't dislike those 2, but I don't want it to be the one thing that stands out in the whole project. Okay, so our last color is very similar to our other colors. So I tried to keep it to where it looked like it was a gradual change. My little grip thing doesn't quite fit this one. But I've been doing this so much lately that my fingers hurt. I actually have this very nice, at least they looked nice, we'll see when I get them, set of hooks on order. Okay, so I anchored on, and I have 1 back loop only, and then a drop down. But yeah, I ordered these wooden handled hooks off of Etsy, and you know, that's the ergonomic, I think is how it's pronounced. It's a little fatter, so you're not having to grip as tight. I can't wait to get them and try them. They should be here, I don't know, what's today? I think it said sometime between the 27th and 29th. I'm not sure. But we'll see. So anyhow, we got our 3 back loop only singles and then a drop down. And it should work like that on every single row except for at the beginning of a row and at the end of the row, because your diagonal line is moving closer and closer to the end, and it's moving further and further away from the beginning. So once it cycles, you have to start a new row. Okay, so our 3. And then a drop down. And again, you decide on how far apart you would like these spaced. I mean, you can do every other one if you wanted to. Or you can do them as far apart as you want to. But I think the standard out there is 6 in multiples of 6. So 5 singles and then a drop down. So we want both loops. This is our last border stitch here. Okay, fasten off. Okay, so that's where we're at so far. Now I want to do a couple more rows of the bluish colors, just so that we can really get a full view of the effect of tearing apart my cake of yarn. Okay, so fasten off, and we have 1, 2, and our third one is a drop down. Now, if you were using only 2 colors, it's really easy to tell where you drop down to, because you would drop down to the same exact color. So when you do it like this, you just need to be mindful and make sure you're going to the second row down when you drop. So not that one, but this one here. Hook up that front loop and then perform your drop down double crochet. 2 and 3 and a drop down. All right, I think we'll stop there. I think you get the idea. It's pretty. I like these colors. This is my other one. See how the diagonal stripes are they're further apart. These are a little closer together, so it gives it a little more texture. But the back, nice and smooth. The colors blend on both of them, nice and smooth. Okay, so that would be all I have for you today. And I appreciate you hanging out to the end of the video with me if you did that. Thank you very much. And I guess if you're going to do a larger project, it's worthwhile to tear apart your cake. But if you're just going to do a little tiny sample like that, you wasted your cake. But could you, if you did it big enough, it almost looks like weaving. Placemat, blanket. If you used cotton yarn, that'd make a nice dishcloth. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. But this is a super easy way to get started in the world of overlay mosaic crochet. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.